This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And before we go any further, I just want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that way that you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. So, Pastor Scott, this past week you were talking about in our Rise and Fall series, where we've been going through 1 Samuel. We were in 1 Samuel chapter 17. It was our second week in this chapter. But you shared a lot about how when we live in such a way that we're doing the right things and causing other people to do the right things, it actually motivates people, because when they see what we do, then they can see themselves as also doing that, as also winning. And so you shared a bit, though, in the beginning about how when we do this, the only way to truly do this effectively is to not pretend to be anybody else. We have to be authentically ourselves and who God has called us to be.
Yeah, and I think everybody, without exception, will have a period of their life where they'll point to and go like, yeah, that wasn't authentically me by any means. And that's because we're all like, especially after you get out of high school, you're in this, like, in your 20s, you're really trying to figure out who you are. And if that doesn't happen, then it kind of comes into your 30s.
Right.
And that for me was like, when I came into ministry, I had been raised in one certain type of church. Southridge was definitely different than that church. And then the pastor that was here that hired me was drastically different than the pastor that came in 18 months after I started on staff here. And so there was like all these worlds colliding, and I couldn't quite find my way. I was trying to just figure it out. And like I could see it in the way that I would preach. Like I would try to, the first handful of sermons that I wrote or so felt a lot like the first guy that I preached under, and then it moved a lot into the second guy. Like I was trying to preach and some of that is, I think that when you're under somebody, you should, if they're saying, hey, this is how we preach here, this is how we preach here. I do believe in that. But then what happens is sometimes you start reading books, and I used to listen to 7, 8, 9, 10 sermons a week from different people, and then you would want to try to be like, you'd want to be Mark Driscoll talking for an hour, being as, abrasive as possible, and then, like, you might go to the other end of the spectrum and listen to too much Andy Stanley, and it's like, you might just be all show and no go, kind of, like, lots of practical advice, but maybe miss, like, I don't know, and I'm not saying anything bad about any of those people, I'm just saying, like, I could feel those swings of who I was trying to be. And then I would watch, like, Mike Todd, and then I'd want to come in and be, like, real energetic. And it's like, that's not all the time me. Like, so it just took a while to figure that out in preaching and try not to be somebody else. And then, the example I gave Sunday was just our pastor that hired you gave me the advice to change the way that I dress to see if that would command more respect.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it did. I think what I actually meant to say Sunday and never got around to was, I actually don't think how I dressed ever had a thing to do with the fact that people would not follow my leadership. It was that I wasn't a good leader. And so that was just something I had to, like, grow into. And, like, you can't just put on a new set of clothes or go to a new place and become a good leader. You actually just have to become a good leader to become a good leader. That's the only way to do it. Like, you can't just go from job to job to job and be like, oh, well, it's their fault. Or no, like, you have to be who God called you to be and become a better leader. And so, like, and then it was a really weird thing that not everybody will probably get to experience in ministry. Like, being a co-pastor was a unique experience, because you finally feel like you're in charge, but you're not really in charge, because everything you say and do still reflects the other person, whether or not that's consistent with them or not. So, like, I would be very careful of things that I would say in sermons, even from 2016 to 2020, just because I was like, I'm speaking on behalf of both of us, and I wouldn't want to say anything or do anything, and I would still kind of watch the way that I dressed, even though I went back to the jeans after the slacks, but I still kept all the button-up shirts and the dress pants, and I went through that like jeans with dress shoes phase.
Yeah.
And it was like it like I wasn't a slob anymore, and but I wasn't dressing like I was, working at a more traditional church. But it still wasn't 100% me, by any means. Like I've always been not a dress shoe person. Like I like sneakers all the way, even when I couldn't afford them in middle school and high school. Like I would find the best that I could for $60. Like I was, just always had multiple. And so it took me, probably the pandemic was nice. It kind of just reset everything in everyone's life to where I was like, you know what? I think I can just be me, and I've been around here long enough that people are cool with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the most fruitful years of ministry is whenever I would stop trying to be what everyone else said that I was supposed to be, and just been like, this is me. I get it. There will be people that will see the way that I dress on a weekend, and they'll go, I'm not going to that church. I don't take that guy. I get that. But there's plenty of people, almost 400 on Sunday, that had no issues showing up.
Right.
And I get it. My messages won't be for everybody. Some people won't like the stories that I tell or the examples that I give or how real and honest I can be about my own failures. That's fine, but that's just I've just stopped trying to be what anyone else thinks that I'm supposed to be, and it's worked. And so that's going to be the thing for everybody else listening to this. If you want to get to that place, you just got to be okay with being you.
Yeah,
and
but
realizing not everyone's going to like it.
Yeah, but I loved what you said about, like, you have to also become a leader, because I think you mentioned in one of the services, I don't know if you mentioned it both, but in one of them you said it's not an excuse to say that you're not going to try to better yourself. Like, that's not what you're talking about here. You're saying, like, who you are is who you are, but then also knowing how you can improve upon that and how you can better yourself, like become a better leader, become more confident in who God says you are, rather than, just saying, well, I'm just not that great at being a leader, so I'm just gonna, suffer through this.
Yeah, at that point in my life, I could have put on a 3-piece suit and still been a crappy leader. That didn't really matter whatsoever. I don't think that you should, necessarily look like a bum, when there's important meetings. Like, I get it, I'm kind of dressed down today, but Mondays are internal meetings. I'm not meeting with anyone from the church or the public, anything like that. Now, if I have a meeting now, I do take it a little bit more like, hey, let's put some decent stuff on. If I'm going to go to lunch with someone from the church, I'll treat that different. So I did learn something from that. I'm not saying that our old pastor was wrong in that by any means. I do think there's something to it. But at the end of the day, I was just a crap leader, and I hadn't come into my own there, and there was no amount of stuff I could put on me. No amount of degrees I could get or clothing I could put that would ever overcompensate for me just being a crappy leader and needing to just put my nose to the grindstone and get better.
Yeah. So you also talked about how the faith that David had wasn't necessarily it wasn't in him and his capability, but rather it was in God, who is the God that can do the impossible, not necessarily himself. Yes, he did rely on his own skills and talents, but more importantly, his words reflected the faith that he had in God. How can we do that in our own lives, like to see those scenarios, those situations that we're faced with, whether at work or at home or with a diagnosis? How can we take that cue from David and apply that in our own lives?
I think one of the most difficult things that kind of go along with what we were just talking about for people is to finally just agree with what God says is already true about you and just putting some people are so afraid of arrogance and pride slipping into their life that they will degrade how God has gifted them and blessed them as if that's some sort of noble character. Yeah. It's not whatsoever. Like, if God has gifted you to be good at something, it's okay to be confident in that, just so long as you can point to where that all came from. Right? I tell people that about my preaching all the time. I wasn't like a killer public speaker or even a conversationalist by any means. Like, so I can only point to God for where I'm at, in my preaching right now. I can only point to God. Yeah, I've worked my butt off for sure. I think you should. But I can only point to God as to the genesis of where all of this has become possible. Right. And so I think some people are afraid of being confident in what God has gifted them with because they're afraid that it'll sound arrogant. It's not arrogant if you're pointing to God and going, no, this is what God did. This isn't what I did. This is what God did. Like, yeah, that is good, or I did do that, or I do that well. Like, that's fine to be confident in that. So I think people are really afraid of that, and we shouldn't be. But ultimately, that's how you end up getting confidence, though, and you go, because it's not about, it was never me.
Right.
Like, and that's what you see when you look at that thing. David goes, this is what I'm going to do. He says, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut your head off, all this. I'll tell you straight up, I'm going to win this. But it's not because I'm so awesome, but it's because I'm backed by a God who is able to do the impossible. And his faith, because of the stuff he had gone through, was so built up that in that moment, his faith is not in, like, David would have no reason to be confident in himself whatsoever. He has to be confident solely in God. It's really a good picture of the gospel in the first place. Like, you have no reason to be confident in and of yourself as to why God should accept you or save you or anything else like that. It's all because of what God has done. That's where our confidence, that's the gospel. It's like, no, you can't, but yes, he can, and he did on your behalf do what you could not do. And so until you get to that place, though, you will feel totally overwhelmed. I told that story on Sunday, and I said it kind of jokingly, but I was dead serious. That third year that I was trying to come up with a teaching calendar, I was going, we've done all the scriptures that I know. Like, early on, I was like, we've done John 3:16, we've done Romans 8, we've done the book of James. What am I going to do? I did all my top level stuff, all the sermon series that I'd been planning for all those years that I was an associate pastor, they're gone. So, and I was like having this moment, I was like, I think I'm just going to have to choose one book of the Bible because I'm out of creativity, I guess. It's all gone. And that was a process of learning. It's like, no. See, you didn't come up with it in the first place. It was always God breathing fresh life into what you were trying to do and accomplish. And he will never, God is so creative, he'll never run out of what to say or what to do by any means. And we haven't yet. I mean, here we are. I started preaching at the end of 2015. We're getting close to 2025, and we actually already have 2025 fully planned out of what we're going to do teaching-wise. And so, I always thought, well, I was overwhelmed because I thought it was up to me. And then when I finally realized, no, I don't have to freak out every year. God is just going to show up just like he always does and speak to all of us around the table and go, this is what we're going to do for the next year. He's never run out of ideas. He never will. So that's not something I have to be upset about or worried about. And more people need to get to that place where they go, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. God's calling me to start a business or do this or whatever it is that he's calling you to do. He goes, listen, if it was his idea, he's going to be the backer of it.
Right.
So you don't have to get overwhelmed by it. As long as you're staying in the center of his will, realize if he led you to it, then he's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
You got to do your part, but he's going to take care of it, so you don't need to be overwhelmed by it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that goes along with the stuff about how you talked about that, we're self-reliant and self-sufficient in our comfort zone. But like that moment for you, that brought you out of your comfort zone where you did have to rely on God and realize oh, he's where I'm getting this stuff. It's not from me. It's from God. So let me rely on him and step out of this comfort zone area and step into those other areas where I can actually allow God to be who I depend on.
And as soon as I did, that whole process actually got easier. Because I was convinced that early on in ministry that it was going to be up to my own creativity and my own cleverness to make preaching and teaching appealing and work. And it wasn't until I got to the end of myself that realized that, no, actually all the best ideas have always been and always will be from God. And so you don't have to sit there and fret and worry about it anymore because it was never you to begin with.
Yeah.
And sometimes all of us just have to go through a process where we're just kind of brought down a couple pegs and go, hey, look, it's really not about you. It really was never about you. And now God's going to prove that to you. And so it made the process easier. Like it made the process so much easier to go, it's not up to you. Because I always want to be so far planned out the way that I'm wired. And sometimes what I've had to do is learn to just go, until the Lord speaks, we just have to sit still. And go, I don't know what it's going to be yet. I may not be able to plan like I would like to plan. So sometimes you just have to sit, but it has made the process easier because it's taken all the burden off of me.
Right.
Because I know God will show up.
Yeah, absolutely. So next you talked a lot about how a lot of Christians think that they're David, but we aren't actually supposed to all fight in the way that we think we are, right? So how do you know what battles are worth fighting, what ones you're supposed to fight, and how you're actually supposed to fight them?
Yeah. All right. So I think that this is a really good thing to mention is that when we talk about fighting battles, the only battles that Christians are meant to fight are they never involve other people in the sense that you think that they do.
Right.
To where you set yourself up as David and you set them up as Goliath, if that is your view of a situation, you're going into it with a very wrong ethic behind what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So the battles that we are called to fight, like so, because somebody could push back and they go, "What about Ephesians 6? You know, put on the full armor of God." He goes, "Yeah. Did you see who you're fighting in Ephesians 6?
Yeah.
The powers and principalities of the unseen world.
Right.
It is the systems that are set up behind that you cannot see. It's all throughout the scriptures. You see the terminology of the world, not meaning the people of the world, but it's these hidden powers and principalities behind what it is that you are seeing. So we're not called to fight flesh and blood. Ephesians 6, put on the full armor of God. Not because your enemies are flesh and blood. That means that if you're sitting there arguing with someone on social media and you're using the text like David and Goliath or the Israelite conquest of the Promised Land as your, like I saw this when the Olympics came out. When the Olympic controversy, everybody was posting that one picture of the Last Supper and the next, then they were posting an Old Testament scripture along with it. And I go, I don't think that you understand that verse doesn't mean that you're supposed to go and fight these people whatsoever. And so I'll say, how do you know? Well, if you are meant to step into a battle, you're trying to challenge the systems and the powers that are behind what it is that you are seeing.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. As Christians, there are many people that want to go on social media and talk about abortion. And they would rather fight with pro-choice opponents about abortion. How should a Christian actually fight? Get involved with the dismantling of the structures that are behind the institutions, not fighting the people. The people are not your enemy. The structures and the systems and the principalities behind them are.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? Okay, here's an easy step. Get involved in fostering. Get involved in adoption.
Yeah, there's an organization called Embrace Grace. We talked about this in my group last night about how they don't just say they're pro-life, but they're pro-love, and they actually work to partner with churches and pregnancy centers to help these women know that there's a place and a people who will be there for them, who will walk them through this, that will get the resources for them. There's so many better ways.
Get involved in a crisis pregnancy center. Get involved with people that are actually going through it, that are on the verge of having to make that decision. Get involved in their lives.
Yeah.
Get involved in a youth ministry that will help raise up a new generation that won't be involved in premarital sex, thus creating the need. Again, none of this is to say that, we're just, no, look, we need to attack the systems and the structures, the systemic things behind the issue, because you sharing that Fox News article on Facebook doesn't do anything whatsoever. You didn't attack a system or a structure. You attacked a person. Oh, but I was just sharing information. No, you weren't. You had someone in mind. When you clicked that share button, you had someone in mind. You were fighting with someone there. And so you're not fighting in the way that Jesus fought whatsoever. Because we never saw Jesus raise a sword one time. In fact, when Peter pulls his sword out to cut off Malchus's ear, he says, no. Put your sword away. Jesus won the victory through service. right? He even washed Judas's feet, knowing that Judas was going to, he already knew Satan had entered him and he was going to betray him. He already knew all of that was going to take place. He knew that by the time they sat down for dinner, because he was sitting here going, one of you is a devil. I know one of you is getting ready to do something nasty to me. I know it. And he still washed their feet anyways. And if you go and you watch the way that the early church flipped the whole Roman Empire upside down to the point by the 4th century, Christianity was the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, the embraced religion of the empire. They did not do it through having a single political candidate, not through a single political activist, not through ads, not through yard signs, not through social media posts, but because the Christian church was so determined to go and to love other people that they became such an attractive group of people that people flocked to them, right? Because they were the people. You know how the early church combated abortion and unwanted children? They went out, because in the Roman Empire, you could go and you could take unwanted children and just sit them outside of the city gate.
Yeah.
They had a place for it. You know what these crazy Christians did? They didn't stand there and criticize the people that were dropping the kids off. They didn't sit there and start fights with them. They went outside of the city gates, they picked those kids up, brought them into their homes, and loved them like their own.
Yep.
So if you feel called to get into the fight for abortion, you're not doing crap by sitting there talking about it on social media. Right? And you can... All right, you feel called to talk about, you fill in the blank. You have to figure out how to systemically get involved, not in a way to fight individuals.
Yeah.
Because you'll never actually make any difference whatsoever.
Right.
Okay, you feel really strongly about certain political issues going on? Great. Get involved in a way that actually brings change rather than just has you sitting on social media causing division.
Yeah.
It's absurd that you'll see all these, we used to sing this song, I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. You remember we sang that song growing up in church?
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that that's Old Testament imagery pulled from the conquest of the Promised Land. He goes, don't really, if you're in the Lord's army, you're in an army of service. That's what you're in. You're in an army of loving your enemies. So that's how you figure out what you're supposed to fight and how to fight it. You don't go after the people. You go after the systems and the structures that are holding the people up.
Yeah.
And when you can begin to dismantle them in the unseen realm, like it should all start with prayer.
Right.
When you begin to dismantle them in the unseen realm, then you can begin to chip away at the systemic issues that are causing this to even be an issue for you.
Right.
And it bothers me so much because I know someone somewhere is going to go, oh, well, David and Goliath, and we're going to try to put that into our current political ideology and go, you know what, here we are, we're fighting Goliath to try to take our country back and all this. You go, no, you are smuggling an Old Testament story into the New Testament that does not belong there. We can learn plenty of stuff from David and Goliath and all the other Old Testament stories, but those are not your marching orders. Jesus gave very clear marching orders that you are to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
Yeah.
You're supposed to turn the other what happened to the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount where we've lost? Turn the other cheek. Someone offends you, someone disagrees with you, you're not supposed to call them out on the carpet.
Right.
Oh, I'm standing for truth. No, you're supposed to pray for them, to love them, to serve them. You are a problem if you can't turn the other cheek, if you can't go the extra mile. And all the while people go, but I'm just standing on truth. He goes, Jesus always stood on truth, and he never did so in a way that he had to attack somebody else. All right, I told the story. I was talking to someone last week that's not a Christian, and I was so taken back by his comments because he wanted to know about. He's interested in Christianity. He was asking questions about how if he were to accept Jesus, would him and his wife have to be antagonistic towards the LGBTQ community? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, would I have to persecute those people if I chose this? And I was like, oh my gosh. Is that is there people outside the church that think that those are our marching orders?
Yeah.
That because there's been so many people that have been antagonistic towards that community that they think that the church is teaching that we're supposed to attack them and persecute them and antagonize them. I just had a moment and I was like, oh, what is our witness to people?
Right.
They think if I sign up for this, I have to be like. And I was telling them, I said, no, we have plenty of people from that community in mine and Megan's life, and like we love those people. Like we just I don't. I said I'm shocked by this that question, but then I was like, it probably comes from good reason because the church that always makes the news is the ones that are standing with signs on the side of the road. Like it's just like that's not what you were called to whatsoever. You are you've never heard me once minimize truth on any of the hot topics. I've got sermons out on the internet on absolutely every hot topic you can imagine. I've never once not taken the traditional Christian view of those whatsoever. And I've also never antagonized one person that disagrees with me on that topic. I've never chased them down to tell them how. I saw something yesterday from a friend on Facebook, and he was just posting stuff, and it was just adamantly wrong and painting church and Christians in a negative light. You know what I did? What most people won't do? I looked at it. I could feel my blood pressure kind of rising, and I could really set him straight right here.
Yeah.
You know what I did?
Prayed for him.
I just kept scrolling because this guy's not in church. He's not a Christian. What good? What am I? What do I stand to gain by fighting with someone on the internet?
Yeah.
Whatsoever. I stand to gain nothing, and I stand to lose everything in that relationship that might eventually open a door to a gospel conversation. That is not minimizing the truth. That is not running from fights. That is acting wise. And if I want to have a conversation with him, I know him well enough to go, hey, let's meet up at Cold River Coffee. I'd love to talk about that thing and give you a little bit more information and context in a way where I'm heard, he's heard, both the love, respect, all of that. Well, I don't have to fight you on the internet in front of everybody. That's craziness. I don't know how in the world we ever got there, but we have to stop fooling ourselves into thinking that we're fighting spiritual battles whenever we're just sharing Fox News and CNN News on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
It's the most ignorant thing I've seen the church do probably in the last couple of decades, ever since social media came around. You are impacting zero change whatsoever through social media.
Yeah.
You are impacting zero lives whatsoever when you sit there and share and you talk about, I just have so much concern about this political cycle, this election that's coming. Look, I get it. If you're big into that stuff, that's just not the way to fight. Go get involved. Go work the polls. Go sign up to, I don't know, do something other than take it to social media because you're doing nothing.
Yeah. And I think the more that we do fight those things in the right way, we do those things and make changes and positive changes, and we see some of those, we will become, again, that attractive, group of people that people want to be a part of, that people want to come in. I think that's probably one of the most effective things that you can do is be the type of people who would attract someone, because to come and see what Christianity is all about when you are acting in such a way that you're constantly antagonizing people or attacking people, that's not something most people want to be a part of.
No, that's not going to motivate anybody whatsoever.
Yeah. So lastly, you talked about how if we want to be the type of person who motivates others to action and to step into what God has for them, we need to finish the job and finish well.
Yeah.
How can we, maybe even ourselves, stay motivated to finish the job? Because I think a lot of people often want to start something, but then it's hard when we face those moments of discouragement or, critics or whatever, we can often want to just pull back and stop. Or maybe we even have trouble even getting started in the first place. But how do we push through and continue to get to that place where we actually finish and finish well?
Yeah, it all starts and ends with keeping the why in front of you. As soon as you lose your why, you will lose your drive to fight whatsoever. Because once you have the proper why, you will do anything that it takes to accomplish that. No matter how difficult. I think the easiest example I have right now is this is going to be my last podcast for about 6 weeks or so. I don't really necessarily want to be gone for 6 weeks, but I do want to finish well, and I want to finish the job that God has for me at Southridge Church. And I know that if I don't pull back and rest when I know that I'm supposed to, I won't be able to do that.
Right.
Sometimes you have to do stuff that doesn't intuitively make sense to make sure that you can finish well. Like you see people all the time being dismissed from ministry because they were just once their stories start coming out, they were just pedal to the metal nonstop, never took a break, never did any soul care, never did any counseling, never did whatever was necessary to keep themselves healthy to lead and finish well. And I mean the popular statistic, and this is a terrible statistic for the church, that 90% of the people that start off in ministry will not finish.
Right.
Only 10% of people that start off in ministry finish their finish their lives as ministers of the gospel.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, and that's because churches do not. I had so many people at our church this past Sunday, since it was going to be my last Sunday for 6 weeks, come up and go, "I'm so glad you're doing this. And I'm so glad this church is letting you do this because most churches would never let this happen. They'd be so afraid that the attendance is going to fall, the giving's going to fall, people will go to another church." And that all very well may happen. Yeah. But first and foremost, we're going to need to realize who's actually in charge of this church.
Right.
Who actually cares about this church even more than any of us. And that's God. This is God's church. He said that he's building his church.
Right.
I am not building his church. You are not building his church. None of us. He is the one that is doing it. And so if he set up rhythms of rest for us, then when we lean into them, the really good thing about them is rhythms of rest cause you to trust God in a way that if you just keep grinding, you might be convinced that it's you. But rest will actually cause you to have to stop, slow down, take a back seat, so that way you can realize who's actually doing it. Because I actually think the church is going to thrive for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's going to be an issue at all.
Right.
I think the people here at Southridge Church are committed to what we're trying to do. But I said this second service, I didn't get into it first service. It's very important to me because everyone keeps going, please come back. Please come back. 'Cause it's funny, somebody asked Megan, they're like, this isn't just extended time off before you all leave for good. And I'm like, no, we're not going anywhere. Megan and I are going to finish the job here. We're going to see this church pay off their mortgage. We're going to see this church have over $100,000 in the bank. This church will be it will be staffed in a way that is financially responsible for the size church that we are. We will have money in the bank. We will have savings. We will have everything set up for the future of this church. I don't know how long that will take us. We're going to see this church be all that God has called it to be. We are going to finish the job, and we're going to finish well, and that's why rest is so important. Because, you can take a short-term view and go, well, what about the next 6 weeks? Who cares if we take a couple steps back over the next 6 weeks? Who cares? Because I'm planning on doing something for the next 20 years.
Right.
Right, and so 6 weeks becomes a blip on the radar whenever you start thinking of things in decades. Rather, I get it. The average pastor only stays somewhere for 24 months, 28 months.
Yeah.
6 weeks is a big deal then.
Yeah.
But whenever, from what Megan and I can tell, we don't have any end date in sight. We have some goals that we want to accomplish here at Southridge, and that's all that we're worried about. So we're going to take a pause here so that way we can finish well. That way we don't want to be the next, because I told second service it was probably a little bit more vulnerable than what I had anticipated. But I could have resigned my position any day, March through May. I would literally pack my family up and move anywhere to get away from everybody in this town. I would have just been gone in a blink of an eye. Wouldn't have cared, not one bit. I mean, we were having conversations, every day it felt like that Megan was going, well, then just quit. I'm tired of hearing about it. Just quit.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not supposed to. I'm not supposed to quit.
Right.
God's got more for us to do here. But she got to the point where she was so fed up with listening to me talk that she was like, literally, just quit. Just be done with it then. Put your money where your mouth's at. Quit whining about it and quit then. Or do whatever you have to do to get healthy. And so that we took that route instead. We did whatever it took to get healthy. And now I'm actually going into a season of rest fully healthy, like in a very good place. I was telling people yesterday, I was like, I don't really, in May I definitely needed it. Right now I don't feel like I need it, but I know that I still have to do it.
Right.
And it's all because we are going to finish well here at Southridge Church. We're going to finish the job that God's put in front of us. And whenever God calls a new pastor to be here, he is going to be a pastor that takes this church. He's not going to have to deal with the pain and the problems of the past.
Right.
He's going to be able to think about the future. We're going to hand this thing off better than what we got it.
Yeah.
And that's our goal. Whenever that is ultimately our goal.
Yeah.
If that's in 5 years, 10 years, 35 years, I don't care when it is. I just want to be where God wants me to be. But whoever gets it next is going to get something drastically different than what the last couple of us have gotten.
Yeah.
That's what Megan and I want for this church. And so
Absolutely.
you have to finish well. Whatever it is that you're doing, you have to finish well. Because if not, the way that you finish matters so much more than the way that you start.
Oh, yeah.
Because people don't really remember the way that you start.
Right.
Go ask Carl Lentz if anyone cares how he started Hillsong, New York.
Right.
No, everybody remembers how he had to resign in shame
Yeah.
and disgrace.
Yeah.
Ask people if anyone cares how Bill Hybel started Willow Creek going door to door selling tomatoes. No, the only thing that they can think about is the women that he hurt in his resignation and shame, and now he literally lives completely out of the public eye.
Yeah.
Nobody cares how you start. Everyone cares how you finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep your why in front of you. Remember to be who you are, be authentic in that, and to make sure that you put your confidence in God and not just yourself. We'll be right back here again next week, or I will be with some others, to give you another Extra Point podcast where we'll dive deeper into the Sunday teaching.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.